The author says, it is obligatory upon every pubescent, sane, pure Muslim to learn the times of these prayers, the times that we talked about last week. So you could be at least testing yourself, right? You have 5 times. You say to yourself, when does Fajr come in? When does Fajr go out? If you don't know the answer, refer back to your notes. And you do like that for the rest of the prayer times. Yeah, and you take the just verbatim statement that's there. Take that and memorize it. Don't say it in your own words. Just memorize it the way it is, and then it will soak in for you, inshallah. Okay, it is obligatory upon every pubescent, sane, pure Muslim to learn the times of these prayers. So they squeezed in here, the translators, not during menses or postpartum bleeding. That's the meaning of pure. So this pure part, it's always going to apply to the men. It's not always going to apply to the women. To learn the times of these prayers and to perform these prayers in their prescribed times. Hence, prayer is not incumbent on the impubescent, the insane, and the original non-Muslim. And I'll remind you here too. You have kafir asli, you have murtad, original kafir and apostate. Those are the 2 types of kuffar. So that means you also have someone who's raised as a Muslim, and you have someone who embraces Islam. That's going to be the other side of that. So, you cannot say everyone is born as a Muslim, because this would mean that there's no one is kafir asli, original kafir. And that would imply also that everyone who is really a kafir, he's a murtad, because he was a Muslim before. And then he left Islam. Now he's murtad. He's not murtad. He's kafir asli. The original non-Muslim is not obligated to pray in the sense that we do not compel them to pray while being a kafir. We don't request that from them. Not just compel. I'm not sure what the Arabic says. La natlubu dhalika minhum. We don't seek that from them. That's how I know it to be. Rather, we say to him, embrace Islam and pray. It is unlawful to perform these prayers ahead of their prescribed times, unless you have an excuse, or to delay them after their prescribed times without an excuse. Hence, if one prays ahead of the prayer time without an excuse, he bears a sin, and his prayer is not valid. It's not valid. It never initiated. He also bears a sin if he delays the prayer until after its time passes. But his prayer is valid, because now it's a make-up prayer. On the other hand, if the delay were for an excuse such as traveling and the like, then it is not sinful. How many excuses are there? Just give me a number if you wouldn't mind. Excuses for not praying on time. Give me a number. Not words, just a number. You said 2. Anyone else? All right. So 2 is for sure correct. And some said 3. What are those 2? For traveling and for rain. And some said for sickness. Now, we're not going to go into the details of those, but we went into the details of those in the other lesson on Thursday. Alhamdulillah. There might be another time you pray late and you're not sinful, which is if you forgot or you slept. And it's a condition that those 2 are not associated with neglect, negligence. This forgetfulness and this sleeping can't be due to negligence, then you'll be sinful. But if it's not due to negligence, then you're not sinful. And when you wake up or you remember, then you have to pray before you die, according to Ash-Shafi'i. You have to make up that prayer before you die. Now, this is what I've been eager to get to. You said, what is considered a valid excuse for praying it early? Travel and rain, and according to some, sickness, with details. All of that with details. Now we want to talk about two things that, if you understand the difference between them well, then all of this is very clear. One thing is something that stops you from praying. And another thing is dawamul hadath. Dawamul hadath. Dawam means perpetuity, lastingness of hadath. Hadath, which is religious impurity. What does that mean, religious impurity, even? It means something that we regard in our bodies by religious judgment. It's not physical. It's hadath. By religious judgment, we regard something in our bodies. After going to the bathroom or the likes of that, passing gas, sleeping, these things that you know, that's called hadath. So there's a big hadath and there's a small hadath. You know what makes a person get into any of that. Ejaculation or sexual intercourse or menses or whatever else makes ghusl obligatory. That's the big hadath. And you know the invalidators of wudu. That's the small hadath. Sometimes a person has ongoing hadath, doesn't stop. There's two simple examples, but really, it's a general rule. Simple example is incontinence of urine. And another simple example is sickness bleeding. Why is feared you'll mix something here? Because you know, if you urinate, breaks your wudu. If a woman menstruates, she can't pray until it's done, and then she has to take a ghusl. So what does a person do if the urine doesn't stop? Or what does a person do if the bleeding doesn't stop? Or anything else like that. We could say, if you want, if a person has some leakage, the type that this thing makes a person get into hadath. So that's one thing. When that doesn't stop, that's called dawamul hadath. Constant impurity. Usually you can't pray when you have hadath. That's why it's feared that a person will mix something here. On the other hand, we're talking about something that just stops you from praying altogether. It disables you from prayer. So what they have here is inhibitive matter. In other translations, we said, in other publications, we said prohibitive matter. It means the same thing. Which prevents the prayer from being an obligation on a person, such as menses, postpartum bleeding, insanity, or fainting. So all of those are they're just going to stop you from praying altogether. If this occurs after sufficient time to only perform the prayer has passed, you had enough time only to perform the prayer. Since the setting in of the prayer time. Since the prayer time came in, you had enough time to pray. And then this occurs. This prohibitive matter occurs after a time in which you could have prayed your 2 rak'ahs of Fajr, or your 4 rak'ahs of another prayer, or your 3 rak'ahs of Maghrib. Then this person must make up that missed prayer. That's clear, insha'Allah. Then this person has to make up that missed prayer. That's a case. That's done. That's easy. It means a woman was pure. The prayer time came in. Enough time passed that she could have performed whatever it was that she had to perform of prayer. Then her menses started. Right then. After she had enough time, her menses started. So now she has to make up this prayer. Or likewise, a person was doing something. And then the prayer time came in. And then after enough time that he could have prayed, he fainted or went insane. Then this person has to make up the prayer later, Yani, when this prohibitive matter goes away. Let me answer the second question first. What if your Menses starts during your prayer, but you don't know, and then later you found out after completing the prayer? Then it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about it. The rule is you judge Menses has started by seeing that, yani, knowing that. So such as seeing that, that's when you judge, right then. By seeing, and you judge that it stopped by seeing. Like you woke up in the morning and found that it stopped. So you saw that. So from that moment, that's when you judge that it stopped. Okay. So that's a case. And then there's a detail mentioned here. Provided that they have the latitude religiously to perform purification before the setting in of the prayer's time. What that means is, this case we just explained that's clear. This was the case of a person who was allowed to make purification ahead of time. Or in other words, this is not the case of a person who's not allowed to advance purification ahead of time. This person has to wait and then make purification when the prayer time comes in. So as long as this is not the person's case, that this person has to make purification only when prayer time comes in, or when the time of the obligation comes in a more broad sense. When the time of the obligation of this purification comes in, that's when he does it. If a person is allowed to advance purification ahead of time, then this is that person's rule. Who's allowed to do that? Anyone who doesn't have this leakage. And also, someone who's not making tayammum. Because tayammum is one of those purifications that you have to wait for the time to come in to do it. It says here, or if an inhibitive matter occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer and its purification has passed, given the person is not permitted to perform purification before the setting in of the prayer's time, like the case of the one afflicted with a matter such as incontinence of urine or istihadah, then one also must make up that missed prayer when the inhibitive matter terminates. So this whole paragraph, brothers and sisters, I advise you to take care of it. Especially if you've learned the obligatory knowledge before, and still this case is not solid for you. Or if an inhibitive matter occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer and its purification has passed, given the person is not permitted to perform purification before the setting in of the prayer's time. So I'm just concerned that's a little bit wordy, but the issue is easy. What this means is, now, well, what if a person does have this leakage? Then this person has to wait for the prayer time to come in to perform purification also. So now you have to add in time for purification, not only time for prayer. So if a person has no such leakage and the prayer time came in, and the person had enough time to pray, and then something just stops him from praying altogether, like menses or insanity, then this person's going to have to make up that prayer later. But if a person does have such leakage, like gas or like fluid of arousal, because he has to pray and doesn't have time and doesn't stop. So all of this is the same thing. If a person has this leakage, then you have to consider having enough time to make purification and prayer. So if this thing that stops the prayer altogether comes before that much time, then this person with this leakage is not going to have to make up that prayer. because this person didn't have enough time for purification and prayer before what stops him from praying altogether stops him. So what this means then is this perpetual impurity does not stop you from prayer. This leakage does not stop you from prayer. You have to pray despite the leakage. So let me read it again here. If an inhibitive matter which prevents the prayer from being an obligation on a person, such as menses, postpartum bleeding, insanity, or fainting, occurs after sufficient time to only perform the prayer has passed. This sufficient time has passed since the setting in of the prayer time. Only the prayer time, only the time for prayer, not purification. Then this one must make up that missed prayer, provided that they have the latitude religiously, that they have the permission to perform purification before the setting in of the prayer's time. That's the case of a person who doesn't have the leakage. And that's also the case of a person who's not making tayammum. Or if an inhibitive matter occurs after sufficient time to perform the prayer and its purification has passed, given the person is not permitted to perform purification before the setting in of the prayer's time, this person is obligated to wait until the time comes in to start the purification. Like who? Like the case of the one afflicted with a matter such as incontinence of urine, or istihaba, sickness bleeding, or defective bleeding. Then one also must make up that missed prayer when the inhibitive matter terminates, because he had enough time to make purification and prayer. And what is the frequency that makes this leakage perpetual? How can you officially stamp that leakage as perpetual when it doesn't give you enough time to complete purification and prayer? That's how frequent the leakage is, that you cannot complete purification and prayer without that. So if you can do purification and prayer, although you have some leakage, then this is not the perpetual impurity. Okay, hold on one second, brother. Let me see. Here's a question. What if you are in a hurry and want to go somewhere but in the same city, and you know that 2 minutes is remaining for the prayer time, but you need to go there in 10 minutes? Then is he or she can pray or not? This one has to pray. Cannot delay the prayer if the person doesn't have an excuse. The excuses are traveling, sickness, and rain. Inside same city means not traveling. You said, you know that 20 minutes is remaining for prayer time, but you need to get there in 10 minutes. As long as you pray on time. You have a question? Yeah, let me unmute you here, inshallah.
If one started, probably prayer came in, and consonants started. Now, prayer came in and one started leaking. Does one still have to pray at that moment?
He doesn't have to pray at that moment.
So he just had to make it up then?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
Amin wa fiq. And so just to say something about that question about the person need to get somewhere in 20 minutes, prayer 10 minutes, etc. The Muslim has to make sure that he schedules everything around his prayers. Now, there's going to be things that come that have strong priority, like a job, for example. Still, though, so like when you go in for interview, for example, the first thing you're going to do is scope out the place. How I'm going to pray here. Oh, they have a closet over there. They have a corner over there. There's some steps over there. There's a parking lot here. What time's lunch? Tight. Amin wa fiq. Yeah, that means if you're going to pray on the sidewalk, you're going to pray on the sidewalk. Doesn't even matter. If you're going to pray in the grass, you're going to pray in the grass, etc. So a person might want to have a carpet with him. Even a small one just for your forehead, maybe. Those are cute, those little ones. Okay. The author says, if the inhibitive matter which prevents the prayer from being an obligation ends, and there were enough time left of the prayer to say Allahu Akbar, so what's that? maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds or less. Allahu Akbar. Or more than that, not less, one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable. So I'm not sure why is this here. Liable, in parentheses. Yeah, obligated is clear. We've been saying it since we learned that word from the first time we say the Shahada. But just for clarity. So, one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable in the case of an excuse. If they are combinable sometimes. If they are possibly combinable. Yani, if you want it, you could take this part and just shift it over here. If in the case of an excuse they are combinable. Yes, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, جُعِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ لِي مَسْجِدًا. The whole earth was made a masjid for me. That means the Muslims who follow Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can pray anywhere on the earth. You want to pray on a rooftop, you want to pray on the top of a car, you want to pray in a helicopter, you want to pray where you want to pray in a submarine, you can pray anywhere. Amin wa fiq. So, one is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if in the case of an excuse they are combinable. That means if they're possibly combinable, i.e. if it is permissible to combine the previous prayer with the current prayer for an excuse such as traveling. So, let me read it again from the top for you. If the inhibitive matter which prevents the prayer from being an obligation ends, so now the Menses goes away, the insanity goes away, he wakes up from his coma, and there were enough time left of the prayer time to say Allahu Akbar that moment right there, or more than that, not less than that, like Allahu, one is obligated, he would be obligated to make up this prayer, the prayer that's in right now. Yani, if the time went out, he's going to make it up. Like, let's say he woke up and there's enough time to say Allahu Akbar and he just got on his feet. Now the prayer's out. So he's going to have to make it up. So if the prayer time is in and just makes the prayer, it's not a make-up prayer. One is obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable. And he would have to make up the prayer before it too. He woke up from his coma, or her menses went off. Let's say at Asr time, Yani. At Asr time, with plenty of time left. Okay, so it's not going to be a make-up prayer, this Asr prayer. So she prays her Asr, but she's going to have to pray, and this one too, who woke up, he's going to have to pray Dhuhr, because it's combinable with Asr. You might say, okay, that's the judgment, so be it. Yes, that's the hukum, that's the judgment. Why is like that? Because Asr time is a time for Dhuhr sometimes. Asr time is a time for Dhuhr prayer sometimes. Asr time is a time for Dhuhr prayer sometimes. Since Asr time is a time for Dhuhr prayer sometimes, then when you woke up at that Asr time, you're going to have to pray Dhuhr and Asr. Same thing for Maghrib and Isha. So one would be obligated to make up this prayer and the prayer before it, if in the case of an excuse they are combinable. Because that means then that the later time is sometimes a time for the earlier prayer. I.e., if it is permissible to combine the previous prayer with the current prayer, during which the inhibitive matter ended, for an excuse, such as traveling. Hence, it is an obligation to pray both the late afternoon and early afternoon prayers, because they are combined together for an excuse, if the inhibitive matter, such as Menses or others, ended, and there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before sunset. So I think that's clear, inshallah. Likewise, it is an obligation to pray both the nightfall and sunset prayers, because they are combined together when there is an excuse. If there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before dawn, i.e. provided the inhibitive matter ended before dawn, by the duration it takes a person to say Allahu Akbar or more, not less. You say, can I give an example? Yeah, that's all of what I've already said is the example. This is just summarizing all of that. All of what I've described for you is the example. So, it says here. Hence, it is an obligation to pray both the late afternoon and the early afternoon prayers because they are combined together. So you're going to pray Dhuhr and Asr if the inhibitive matter, like Menses, ended and there was enough time left to say Allahu Akbar before sunset, before Maghrib came in. Likewise, it's an obligation to pray both nightfall and sunset prayers because they're combined together. If you have an excuse, they're combinable. If there's enough time to say Allahu Akbar before Fajr comes in, as long as you had enough time to say Allahu Akbar, yani the Menses ended or the person woke up, that's it. Inshallah, that's clear for you. And we'll stop there.